One cannonball struck true, mortally wounding Campbell in the thigh, almost completely shearing off his leg. Major...
Oh my God. Alright, folks, Battle of Fontenoy. I can't pronounce that suggestion. To me, for me, a reaction by me.
On October 20th, 1740, Charles VI, Holy Roman Emperor and last male heir of the House of Habsburg, died at the age of 55. Ruling over a wide swath of Central Europe, the Habsburgs were also the traditional rulers of the Holy Roman Empire, having dominated German politics for the past 3 centuries.
I
The
see.
seeds of renewed conflict in Europe in 1740 were sown in the peace agreements of the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, which ended the War of the Spanish Succession. The Pragmatic Sanction, one of the many edicts in the treaty, stated that the throne of the Holy Roman Empire in Vienna should pass to Charles's eldest son, or in the absence of a son, to his eldest daughter, Maria Theresa. When Charles died without siring an heir in 1740, Maria Theresa ascended the throne of the Habsburg monarchy and became heir to the Holy Roman Empire. Despite the edict in the Treaty of Utrecht, Prince-Elector Charles Albert of Bavaria challenged Maria Theresa's right to inherit the Holy Roman Empire. He cited Europe's traditional and ancient Salic law, which stated that women are excluded from the laws of succession. Charles had the support of the Kingdom of France, the Kingdom of Prussia, and the Electorate of Bavaria.
Ooh.
The Pragmatic Alliance backed Maria Theresa, which was comprised of Austria, the Kingdom of Great Britain, the Electorate of Hanover, and the Dutch Republic. As the conflict widened, Spain, Sardinia, Saxony, Sweden, and even the Russian Empire were drawn into the struggle for power in Central Europe.
Holy crap,
The
okay.
pretext for war was Maria Theresa's right to inherit from her father, but in reality, France, Prussia, and Bavaria saw the new conflict as an opportunity to challenge Habsburg power. On December 16th, 1740, King Frederick II of Prussia launched a preemptive invasion of the Austrian lands in Silesia, marking the start of the First Silesian War in Germany. This was the opening act of the larger War of the Austrian Succession.
I've heard about the War of the Austrian Succession, and I'm not gonna lie, I never really knew much about it. I've always wanted to know, like, what in the world happened here. So, I'm about to get my question answered. Your mistake was not having patience to wait. Ours was exposing ourselves to destruction and not making us use of our victory.
The war between the two sides was conducted in 3 theaters across Central Europe, the Austrian Netherlands, and northern Italy, as well as on the high seas. On June 27, 1743, the Pragmatic Army, comprised of Austrian, British, and Hanoverian forces, dealt a decisive defeat to the French army, led by the Duke of Noailles at Dettingen in the Electorate of Mainz. During the engagement, King
Oh wow,
George
Mainz was an okay.
II of Britain led the Pragmatic Army, marking the last time a British monarch took part in a battle. At Dettingen, the French suffered 5,000 casualties. Combined casualties for the Pragmatic Army were only about half the French numbers. Although the Battle of Dettingen ended in a major tactical victory for the Pragmatic Army, they failed to follow up the success with a strategic victory for the campaign in Germany, because of King George's unwillingness to pursue the French after the great victory.
You know, that's crazy. Britain took all the way until 1745 to stop sending its monarchs into battle. All the way to the early modern era. I feel like if people freaking out, I feel like if people like understood that monarchs kind of low-key risked their lives by sending themselves into battle, they wouldn't really hate monarchy that much. I'm just saying, because a lot of people, they're like, oh my gosh, monarchs, they're like born into wealth and luxury, which is true today. But back then, it was like, okay, well, at least they have to risk their lives and throw themselves into battle too and lead their troops. You know what I mean? So
the next year, 1744, saw Austria and central Germany become the principal theater of war in the Second Silesian War. It was in 1744 that Marshal Saxe entered the scene for the French. 49-year-old Maurice de Saxe, Comte de Saxe, was the illegitimate son of King Augustus II of Poland-Lithuania and the Elector of Saxony.
illegitimate?
Newly promoted to the rank of Marshal of France, Saxe defended Flanders with 30,000 men against...
What does he mean, illegitimate? What? Illegitimate son? What?
...a pragmatic force of twice that size. Saxe had an impressive military record, having served under the Duke of Marlborough in the 1709 Battle of Malplaquet during the War of the Spanish Succession, as well as joining Prince Eugene of Savoy against the Ottomans in the 1717 Siege of Belgrade during the Austro-Turkish War. Meanwhile, Field Marshal George Wade, the Allied commander, readied a campaign plan centered around seizing the important French fortress of Lille. If the Allies took Lille, they would greatly endanger the French position in Flanders. Controlling Lille would have also provided the Allies a base for an advance on Paris itself. However, Saxe pressed Wade ceaselessly, keeping him off balance. In one instance, the French surprised and overwhelmed the Allied headquarters.
Oh, wow.
Unable to stave off the pressure, Wade surrendered the initiative and retreated to winter quarters at Antwerp. Prince William Augustus, the Duke of Cumberland, assumed command of the Allied army. The 24-year-old Duke was King George's second son. Having distinguished himself at Dettingen, he was highly thought of by his men. Britain's allies readily accepted him as Captain General of His Majesty's forces serving in Europe and Commander-in-Chief of the Pragmatic Army. At his headquarters...
For a 24-year-old, he looks very old. I mean, look at him, bro.
Saxe meticulously planned for the upcoming 1745 campaign, insisting the offensive must start earlier than the Allies expected. With a preemptive strike, Saxe would gain the initiative in the campaign and force the Allies to react to his moves rather than the other way around. Meanwhile, the Duke of Cumberland prepared for a drive on Mons, where Allied intelligence reports placed a French army, a buffer fortress town between France and the Austrian Netherlands. Not expecting that Mons could resist for too long, Cumberland marched his army out of winter quarters towards the town. Unknown to Cumberland, however, Saxe's plan was to attack the fortress of Tournai, situated some 30 miles northwest of Mons. The French marshal dispatched 22,000 troops to besiege Tournai, which was garrisoned by 9,000 Dutch troops. Maintaining initiative, Saxe then marshaled his main army of 50,000 men and 100 cannon to occupy the area between Fontenoy and Antoine, just southeast of Tournai. Holding this position, he blocked the Pragmatic Army's advance to Tournai. Saxe tasked his men with fortifying the towns of Fontenoy and Antoine. The attacking army would have to struggle through a rock-filled ditch while under fire to engage the entrenched musketeers, positioned atop earthworks behind a high wall. 3 redoubts strengthened the fortified line between the two villages. The marshal had 2 more redoubts built to the northeast, the Redoute de Chambonnat and Redoute 2, on the edge of the Bois de Barry, a sprawling maintained wood. A patch of trees on the west end of the forest was cut down to give the 2 redoubts a clear field of fire against Allied troops, should they try to advance between Fontenoy and the Bois de Barry. However, Saxe decided not to fortify the gap between Fontenoy and the Bois de Barry, believing...
Bro, I swear, all of these French words. My brain. I just did a whole reaction. Freaking hell. A whole reaction to the Palace of Versailles and these French words being pronounced. I'm like Baudet Bois. What in the world? That does not sound like how it's spelt. Oh my gosh. Freaking hell, man.
That cut through the area made it impassable. Instead, he deployed the Garde Francaise in that position to defend the sector. Additionally, he posted the 2 battalions of the Arquebusier de Grasson Brigade in the woods to open fire into the flank of any force attempting an attack on the Redoute 2, the westernmost of the 2 earthworks. Despite his vigorous preparations, Marshal Saxe had fallen ill on the eve of the coming battle with dropsy and needed to travel by carriage. Nevertheless, he continued overseeing the build-up of defenses. By the evening of May 10th, 1745, the Pragmatic Army, numbering 50,000 troops and 93 cannon, appeared in front of Fontenoy, having marched all day in muddy conditions. A thick fog loomed low over the fields, making it nearly impossible for Cumberland to estimate with any accuracy the strength of the French positions. Nevertheless, he concluded that the Redoute 2 was the main objective and needed to be captured for his attack to succeed. With this in mind, Cumberland instructed Brigadier General Richard Ingoldsby to advance with his brigade of 2,000 men, comprised of 5 foot regiments, and clear out the Bois de Barry of any French troops, and then seize the Redoute 2. The sweeping attack was to be the Pragmatic Army's opening move of the morning. Cumberland ordered Ingoldsby to head straight for Redoute 2 and capture the battery. He was to turn the guns on the French, but if that couldn't be accomplished, he was instructed to spike them. A detail of British artillerymen joined the attack for this purpose.
Yeah, I really wonder who's gonna win this. Like, I can't. British versus French. This is. Let's see. They rush upon us with more violence than ever sea did when driven by a tempest.
At 6 a.m. on May 11th, 1745, Ingoldsby's brigade launched its assault, marking the start of the Battle of Fontenoy.
Fontenoy, that's what it's called.
Tore into Ingoldsby's right flank with intense musket volleys as the British redcoats pushed forward. Refusing advice to send light infantry to clear the woods, Ingoldsby requested that 3 6-pounder guns be brought up to support the attack, not realizing that halting the attack until the artillery was brought forward would waste valuable time.
And men.
Increasingly frustrated with Ingoldsby's delays, Cumberland rode across the battlefield to help direct the artillery fire. He trained the guns on the Bois de Barry and had them fire canister shot to drive off the French from the tree line. Satisfied that the artillery support would prompt Ingoldsby to continue the attack, Cumberland rode back to attend to other urgent matters on the field. With Colonel Sir Robert Munro's Royal Highlanders Regiment leading the charge, Ingoldsby's men advanced through muddy ravines and sunken roads, but were stopped dead by heavy fire from the Normandy Brigade positioned in front of them.
Bro, the French, man, the French. Oof. I kind of expected this, I'm not gonna lie, bro. I kind of expected this, because you're in a dense forest like this, bro. Like, I really did expect that.
Upshooting of the men from the Arquebusier de Grasson was particularly deadly. The French troops in the back passed loaded muskets to the front to be fired, keeping the British redcoats pinned down.
Oh! That is so genius. Holy, that's basically automatic machine gun fire. Oh Okay. Oh, yeah, I would not want to be a radical in that position right now.
The frustrated Cumberland
That's
again
mad.
rode back, but could not convince Ingoldsby to advance. Despite the continuous pressure from the French musket fire, Ingoldsby in fact greatly overestimated their numbers and, instead of attacking, he remained on the defensive.
Bro,
All the while the French
bro,
bombardment
this guy trash.
continued.
This guy is trash, bro.
Luckily for the Allies, due to the distance, some shots dropped and rolled through their lines. Exasperated, Cumberland sent out the 15 squadrons of the British Horse Regiment, commanded by Lieutenant General James Campbell, to draw French musket and cannon fire onto themselves in a desperate attempt to force Ingoldsby to move.
Bro, this
Campbell
man.
soaked up the pressure.
Bro, how does this man still have his job?
And admirably
How does
led
Inglewood
his
still
men
have his
forward.
job?
The continuous shelling from the Redoute felling many of his British and Hanoverian troopers.
Oh.
But one cannonball struck true, mortally wounding Campbell in the thigh, almost completely shearing off his leg. Major
Oh my god. Oh, I felt that. I felt that in my thigh, bro. Oh, I felt that in my thigh. I swear, I'm never ready for this stuff. Never ready for this stuff, man. Oh my gosh, that's brutal. That's freaking brutal. And you know what? You know what? I bet you, right? I bet you 100,000% they were purposely aiming for that guy. 100,000%.
General John Lindsay, the Earl of Crawford, assumed command and immediately withdrew his cavalry squadrons from the firing line.
Dude, this guy, Ingoldsby, costed this man his life. How does he still have his job? No, like, actually.
He retreated behind the British infantry to reform. As the morning wore on, King Louis XV crossed the Scheldt River at Calais with the Dauphin Louis and Marc-René de Voyer, the Comte d'Argenson and French Minister of War, moving up to a vantage point behind the French lines to observe the progress of the battle. 2 squadrons of the Garde de Cheval followed close as an escort to the king. Marshal Saxe, worried that Cumberland's concerted effort in the Bois de Barry would turn the French left flank, ordered all available gun crews to shell the pragmatic army once the mist cleared. When the French artillery barrage commenced, the Allied batteries responded. The protracted artillery exchange was largely inconsequential. Once the mass bombardment stopped, Lieutenant General John Ligonier pushed ahead with his infantry. French cannonade from fixed positions erupted, and smaller guns unleashed on the Allied infantry, which was now in range. The Anglo-Hanoverian infantry advanced resolutely in the face of the artillery fire, closing ranks whenever the French cannon blasted holes in their line.
I'm gonna tell you something right now. I'm not even rooting for any side right now. I just kind of want to see like who's more skilled.
Once they advanced into position, the second line pressed ahead. Cumberland ordered 7 light cannons forward to put pressure on the French gun crews. Louis the Duc de Gramont, commander of the Garde Francaise, could easily be seen mounted atop his white steed, despite the smoke and dust. British gunners took aim and fired round shot at his position.
Bro!
And mortally wounded, a cannonball shattering his thigh.
Of course it's the thigh. It's always the thigh. It's always the thigh. I knew it. I knew they were purposely aiming for these people. Freaking hell. Ever since I reacted to Napoleon, oh my goodness, I'm like, yeah, 100,000% these people are doing this. And it's kind of hilariously sad, bro. It's kind of hilariously sad because I just imagine those people like, hey, yo, bro, like, look, bro, he's right there. And like, they're like shooting and missing. They're like, wait, shift to this position right here. And then like when they finally get him, they're like, oh my gosh, you actually did it. I don't know, man, that's how I imagine it.
Saxe promptly replaced the fallen general with Louis-Antoine de Ganteaume, and seeing how exposed the Garde Francaise and Garde Suisse were to Allied infantry fire, he ordered them back to a safer position to avoid more needless casualties.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, why are they not doing that?
Spoke to Ingoldsby, this time ordering him to consolidate his position in the Bois de Barry and stop all attempts to capture the Redoute II. By now, the Duke may have received reports that the large infantry reserves on the French left greatly outnumbered Ingoldsby's brigade. With such a small force, capturing the Redoute II would be impossible. Thus, Cumberland had little choice but to abandon the push on the right. In the southern sector, Prince Karl August Friedrich of Waldeck-Pyrmont heard the battle raging across the field and interpreted this as the moment to advance on the French positions between Antoine and Fontenoy. 6-pounder shots marked the start of the attack. 2 Dutch mounted columns drove forward to form up in support of the infantry. Long battle lines of blue-clad Dutchmen marched ahead with fixed bayonets towards the French right flank. Waiting in the trenches, the French infantry steadied their aim, then unleashed a heavy fusillade on the Dutch. French batteries blasted holes right through the Dutch ranks.
Bro, I could only imagine.
Disoriented, much of the Waldeck infantry regiment drifted to the right. This exposed a large gap in the Dutch formation.
Oh my gosh.
Advancing up the slope, the Dutch infantry pressed on to the village of Fontenoy. Waldeck sent out 3 dragoon squadrons to restore the proper direction of attack for the Dutch formation. As they drew closer, the French redoubt menacingly bristled with guns, waiting to take them on.
Bro,
Despite being partially concealed by the mist, the Dutch battalion stood little chance against the heavy French artillery fire.
Yeah.
French musketry gunned down most of their officers in the front ranks.
Wow.
Still,
wow.
The Dutch refused to vacate the line, valiantly pressing forward.
Hey,
but
respect.
Headway, they eventually withdrew to reform their shaken ranks. The Prince of Waldeck-Pyrmont then sent in the 2nd Dutch column, but they were blasted by the same 16 guns from the 3 batteries that the 1st column had encountered. The attack
Why didn't he send them in all together at once? I thought that's what he was gonna do.
of the 2nd formation also faltered under the relentless French fire. As the battered Dutch staggered back to their positions, one of their cavalry squadrons routed from the battle, galloping entirely off the battlefield.
Wow.
Many of those regrouping
Bro, he said, he looked at the situation, what happened, he said, nah, bro. He said, we not winning this, I'm out.
were still within the range of the French artillery, which bombarded them with no retaliation. The floundering Dutch...
Yo, the French are just mercilessly just spamming artillery, and it is so mean. It's so freaking mean what the French are doing, bro. Is this even a battle at this point? It's just a freaking artillery, like, I can't even curse, bro, but like,
Dutch attack had lasted no more than an hour. At 11 a.m., Cumberland ordered the Hanoverian Borschlanger regiment to drive the French from the Bois de Barry at all costs. But just like Ingoldsby, the Hanoverians were met with a hail of artillery fire from the Redoute II. Finally abandoning the effort on the right, the Duke moved 2 regiments, including Monroe's Highlanders, to the left flank to reinforce a renewed Dutch attack. Field Marshal Christian Moritz Koenigsegg Rottenfels, commanding the Austrian troops in the Allied army, requested that another 4 British howitzers be brought to the left to support the attack. With the Borschlangers positioned next to the guns, the Duke of Cumberland entrusted Colonel Scipio Duroy with commanding the regiment in the upcoming attack.
alright?
Duroy arrayed the men, but failed to signal the Dutch to his left to prepare to attack at the same time. More disruption came from Ingoldsby's sector when he was wounded by a French musket ball and had to be carried to safety. Hanoverian Major General Ludwig von Zastrow assumed command.
Honestly, he deserved to... can't say that word, but he deserved to get oofed for causing that other guy his life. I'm not even gonna lie.
Monroe and Duroc advanced but were unsupported by the Dutch, who still waited for the signal. Nevertheless, Monroe's rapid advance through a ravine surprised the French. He ordered his Highlanders to lie prone upon receiving the French volleys and then rise to fire their own. But Monroe himself refused to go to ground, not wanting to look undignified to his men. Having brought their broadswords into battle, the Scotsmen mauled the Dauphin regiment in close quarters, hunting them down among the trenches. The French...
That's right! Scotsmen! Even though I'm not completely pure, still my relatives.
Troops only able to block the sword blows with their muskets. Monroe's men overran a French battery, felling most of the gunners, who spotted the Scots too late, charging from the smoke. Saxe hurried...
I swear, bro, it's always the Scots that always carry the English army. I can't make that up, bro. You can quote me on that, bro. The Scots, man. You're like the bread and butter of the English army.
He sent the Duroc regiment to help repair the faltering line at Fontenoy, finally enabling the defenders to drive back Monroe's and Duroc's men. Only now did Waldeck get word, promptly sending the Dutch infantry forward. But by now, Duroc's unsupported regiments had retreated, having suffered severe casualties during their attack on Fontenoy.
Bro, oh my
Waldeck's
goodness,
troops met
man.
a hail of round shot and canister and had to withdraw. The disjointed Allied attack failing to achieve a breakthrough. Despite Cumberland's best efforts, Saxe's right flank and center firmly held their original positions.
Yeah, and they're not breaking. Gentlemen of the French Guards, would you care to fire? British First Guard addressing the French Guards at Fontenoy.
Now came the turn of the vaunted British Line infantry to try to break through the French center. Formed into two lines, they numbered 16,000 men.
Ooh.
Cumberland joined them on horseback with his staff as final preparations were made. On the right, taking posts of honor in the first line, were the 1st Foot Guards, 3rd Foot Guards, and the 2nd Foot Guards. Next in seniority were the Royal Brigade and Onslow's Brigade. Arrayed behind them in the second line were Howard's Brigade, Sowell's Brigade, and the remainder of the Hanoverian Brigade. Cumberland's plan was to drive his Anglo-Hanoverian infantry right through the French left center, and then swing left to roll up their lines. Simultaneously, Duroc would attack Fontenoy and press the French positions there, thus drawing fire away from the Allied advance in the center. The British advanced for 800 yards up the wet incline, maintaining formation while pushing through the marshy ravine that Saxe deemed impassable. French guns...
Bro, at this point, I've reacted to so much stuff. Anything deemed impossible is the most possible thing ever.
raked them from both sides, felling soldiers and opening holes in their ranks, which were closed by the disciplined British troops dressing to the right. As they reached the top, they ran into the French and Swiss Guard brigades and 3 regiments, appearing from a sunken road just 70 yards away. Moments later, the French heavy close-range volley momentarily stunned the surprised British, but many shots missed their marks as the French aimed too high. Those falling in the front of the Allied line were promptly replaced by men from the rear. The resolute British returned fire, shooting by platoon rather than by rank. Muskets loaded in the rear were passed forward to the men in the front, the rolling fire of the British hard pressing the French. After their musket volleys, the British pushed on through the smoke, steadily closing the distance with the French with each fusillade until they got within point-blank range.
Golly!
Rolling British volleys ripped through the French and Swiss Guards brigades, with both breaking under the weight of the assault. As they withdrew, some 400 dead and dying French troops were left behind.
Bro, this is... who is winning? I don't understand. Who is winning right now?
On the French left, the Irish Brigade, commanded by Charles O'Brien, the Comte de Thomond, moved to the front to strengthen the French line. But they had to turn back, having received no support from the French battalions, many of whom were by now on the verge of fleeing. Volleys coming from the Redoute II and the Grassin light infantry caused confusion among the British ranks. But order was quickly restored. The men fixed bayonets and relentlessly moved forward, urged on by the Duke of Cumberland.
All right.
His men in the left center low on ammunition, their position was carried. The staunch British infantry had seemingly pulled victory from what had previously looked like near certain defeat, having all but routed Sax's best infantry regiments.
Yeah,
It seemed that the French morale was on the verge of collapse.
Now they still got a lot.
Came that the king was being advised to retreat to safety. Marshal Saxe hurried off the field to Louis's tent to inform the king of the situation on the battlefield.
I'm not calling
He
it.
stated that the battle was lost. He and several court advisors urged the king and Dauphin to quickly withdraw across the Scheldt back to safety. Upon hearing this, Saxe was outraged, furiously demanding that Noailles and the other advisors show themselves from the king's entourage and berating them for their defeatist attitudes.
Yeah, Saxe, you tell him.
Himself emerged from the crowd and calmly affirmed his decision to stand by Saxe and his army. Saxe jerked his horse around and remarked, "We must all conquer or die," then rode back toward the battle.
Oh my gosh, man, that is cold. That was cold.
Battlefield.
That was cool. Look, I've done so many reactions at this point. Anytime someone is cold, make a cold quote like that, you know they're about to pull something magnificent.
Back on the front, the disciplined British infantry resolutely pressed forward, shifting slightly to the left, away from the harassing fire on the edge of the Bois de Paris, while calmly continued firing rolling volleys at the French center. The Auberterre regiment harassed their left to try slowing their advance, but they broke under the deadly volley fire. Saxe then moved up the Roy regiment from Fontenoy, but they too were driven off by the heavy fusillade of the British foot guards, taking heavy losses. The Hainaut, Royal and the Vassaux regiments were brought forward from the right to close the gap and restore the French line. While they managed to hold their position, they could not advance, the British rolling volleys decimating their ranks. In what became a pivotal moment of the battle, Saxe ordered a cavalry charge. The British, hearing the thunderous gallop, refused their flanks and brought the 3-pounder cannon forward to help disrupt the French cavalry advance. But the mounted charge lacked the strength that Saxe had expected. This was due to Louis-Charles Le Tellier, the Comte d'Estrees and commander of the Brigade de Royal Cravats, failing to send his entire cavalry force, bringing forward only 4 regiments, just 2,500 men, to attack the British.
Yeah, man, what are you doing, man?
Mounted regiments advanced at a trotting pace towards the enemy line, the cavaliers keeping their horses from charging to prevent them from tiring quickly. Once the cavaliers came within 50 yards, the British line unleashed hell. The French, unable to close the distance and take on the British with their swords, fired carbines and pistols as they wheeled about.
Carbines and pistols is mad.
Regiments charged to assist them, but were met with the same deadly British volleys. The few cavaliers who were able to force their horses to close in were met by the muskets and bayonets of the 2nd Foot Guards. The Royal Roussillon Regiment approached at a trot once again, the riders snaking their way through a field of dead and wounded horses and men, only to be repelled like those before them. While Saxe's cavalry regiments failed to break the British line, they succeeded in stopping their relentless advance. And as they pressed forward again, the British realized that there was not enough room near the top of the slope to keep their formation. The last obstacle to victory appeared to be 2 fresh lines of French cavalry in the center. But as the British advanced, the narrowing gap and the threat of French artillery raking their flanks and rear forced the men to instinctively move away from the flanks, thus narrowing their lines and gradually deepening their formations towards the rear. In the end, they formed 3 sides of a massive square with the rear open. Inside the square, the Hanoverians under Major General Ludwig von Zastrow were the reserve. But the further the Allied formations advanced, the more exposed their flanks and rear became. At 12:30 p.m., Saxe decided that now was the time to counterattack. Gathering 5 shattered regiments that managed to rally, he ordered 3 to engage the west side of the Anglo-Hanoverian square, with another 2 attacking the north side. Massed on narrow fronts, the French outnumbered the British, who had endured the artillery bombardment for hours. Saxe's last-ditch
I'm surprised the British did not falter under all of the artillery fire.
effort was almost foiled by Joseph de Randon, the Comte d'Apcher, when he led 2 cavalry regiments in a disorganized attack against the northwest corner of the Allied formation. 4 squadrons from the Noailles Cavalry Regiment punched through the line of the 3rd Foot Guards before charging at full tilt into the Hanoverian reserves. The lead squadron was literally mowed down, with only 14 survivors. Estrie sent a cavalry brigade to protect d'Apcher's retreat, but this action blocked the advance of the Irishmen, causing confusion. Cumberland, sensing the indecisiveness among the French leadership, instructed the Earl of Albemarle to order the 2nd Foot Guards to advance on Estrie's cavalry support and open fire from close range. Cumberland then sent 2 regiments to push south towards Fontenoy to create space for his army to move away from the Bois de Barry. King Louis directed Louis-Philippe d'Orléans, the Comte de Montesson, to send the Maison de Roi and carabiners of the French cavalry forward to divert pressure away from Fontenoy. But they attacked without orders.
Carabiners. Oh yeah. Sometimes I forget that when this stuff is happening, the Caribbean was fully well settled and colonized by the Europeans at this point. Hey, but that's cool though.
Towards the British piecemeal in a repeat of the earlier French cavalry charges. As they closed in, they were cut to pieces by British volley fire.
You know, it's funny because the French Caribbean, the French were more willing to allow like Caribbean people to serve in the French army, but the British were kind of like not like they weren't really as keen about that like the French were. So it's not really like shocking for me to hear like Caribbean people, like French Caribbean people, obviously fighting in the French army at this point. It's really not shocking. Like some people, when you see like movies about France or something, and they see like black soldiers, they think that they're trying to put like liberal or trying to put an agenda, but I'm like, that's kind of normal for France to do. Funny enough, France wasn't really like, I I wouldn't say racist. So as long as you assimilated and become French, if that makes sense. England, though, that was a different story. For not like the whole like English later British population, because Barbados, my country, was settled before England and Scotland united. Yeah, that was different. That was a different story. But it was more like the elites that did that whole racism nonsense with their snobby attitude and whatnot. Like,
with the French army on the brink of collapse, Saxe was informed that the guns at Fontenoy had depleted their supply of round shot.
Finally, why in the world?
Firing blank cartridges. Saxe, now certain that the superior British infantry was exhausted, ordered all available artillery to aim at the Anglo-Hanoverians and brought forward his last remaining fresh troops. The Irish brigade saw little action and a few more units were still in good shape. All told, Saxe had 13 fresh battalions for an attack against the exhausted British. Saxe's right flank stayed put. By 1 p.m., a somber mood plagued the French high-ranking officers, except for Marshal Saxe, who remained optimistic for a French victory. Marshal Noailles urged the king and the Dauphin to retreat to safety behind the Scheldt River, but Louis did not entertain this idea. He would not betray Saxe's trust. Although all of Saxe's local assaults were repelled, this strategy did succeed in stopping the British column's relentless advance. Now was the time to strike. Saxe rallied the Normandy and Vaisseau regiments, supported by the French and Swiss guards, and ordered them back into the fray. He instructed the Irish troops, one of his last remaining reserves, to attack the Allied positions in front of them. To the sounds of fife and drum, the Irish troops pressed forward as the rolling British volleys decimated their ranks. The stubborn Irish...
So funny hearing British fighting Irish, because Irish people are also British. well, yeah, you could say that.
Irishmen persevered, engaging the Redcoats in fierce hand-to-hand combat.
Oh my gosh.
Initially,
the real Britons fighting British. I mean, you have Scots in here too, most likely. So Britons fighting Britons. English people are not Britons. They'll say that they are, but I don't. No, they're not. No, Britons are the actual like indigenous people of Britannia. The English came and took that term from them. That's probably going to trigger a lot of English people that I said that, but they're not. English people are Germanic. So
the British managed to repel the Irish assault, but the tide began to turn in favor of the French when the Normandy regiment charged the Allied battery in the back of the square, relieving pressure on their compatriots. In a joint charge, the French and Irish troops pushed back the British. Having realized that his army had been fought to a standstill, Cumberland shifted his focus to disengaging his troops as safely as possible, a most difficult task. As the British and Hanoverians commenced their withdrawal, Saxe once more ordered forward 2 cavalry regiments. Despite the British foot companies forming into squares, the French cavalry charge proved too formidable, shattering their lines. The remaining positions of the exhausted Redcoats finally disintegrated as the Allied army began fighting their way eastward. Now, the same bottleneck leading down the slope posed an obstacle to the counter-attacking French, much like it had to the British earlier in the day. Saxe channeled up to 30 battalions through the narrow passage in pursuit of the retreating British. To shield Cumberland's withdrawal, the Earl of Crawford deployed his cavalry brigades. As the French artillery fire couldn't be avoided, Crawford directed his troops into the midst of the French infantry, impeding their progress at a heavy cost to his horses and cavaliers. Saxe, realizing that further pursuit was futile, stopped his troops. The two armies gradually disengaged, and the Battle of Fontenoy came to a bloody conclusion around 2 p.m. The French marshal made his way to inform the king about the triumph of the French forces. The Battle of Fontenoy was one of the bloodiest battles of the 18th century, and the French just barely won it through sheer determination and ferocious counterattacks. It cost them 6,000 to 8,000 men killed or wounded. The Pragmatic Army left 7,560 to 10,000 men killed or wounded, littered across the battlefield of Fontenoy, along with 2,000 men and 40 guns captured. With no hope of relief, the Dutch garrison at Tournai surrendered unconditionally to the French on June 20th. The French army then marched into the Austrian Netherlands, threatening the British connection to continental Europe. Through his brilliant operations in the Austrian Netherlands, Marshal Saxe cemented his reputation as one of the greatest generals of the 18th century. He had restored French supremacy in Western Europe. The Battle of Fontenoy, bloody as it may have been, was one of the decisive battles of the War of the Austrian Succession, ceding the initiative in the Low Countries theatre to the French. Saxe would make sure that they would not surrender this initiative for the rest of the war.
I've been good on France, bro. I'm not gonna lie to you. A lot of these reactions that I've been doing to French history, bro, low-key make me respect France a lot more. I'm not even gonna lie to you, bro.
If you stayed around this far,
If you stayed around this far, thank you. And if you aren't subscribed to my channel, go subscribe and check out my reactions on my videos, man. Also, like the video. Okay, like the video. If you have any suggestions for me, go comment down below. Eventually, I will do it. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.